I know Vladimir Putin very well. I've been involved in a conflict with him, a very heated conflict over the last decade. We were exposing corruption in Gazprom and other companies that I was invested in. I was expelled and declared a threat to national security for exposing corruption in state companies, which they should have been happy to try to get rid of that corruption. After I was expelled, my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, discovered a major $230 million government corruption scheme. He reported it, testified against the officials involved, and in retaliation, he was arrested, tortured for 358 days in Russian custody, and killed 12 years ago. And one could have, he should have been declared a hero for exposing the corruption. Instead, Vladimir Putin put him on trial 3 years after killing him in the first, and convicted him in the first ever posthumous trial in the history of Russia. First time that Russia ever has convicted a dead man. Vladimir Putin has been there for 22 years. In his 22 years, he's stolen an enormous amount of money. I would guess $200 billion, maybe more at this point. He's stolen that money by killing people, taking people hostage, doing all sorts of terrible things. And that money should have gone to paying for roads, hospitals, and other public services. So after 20 years, people are tired of him. And he sees the writing on the wall. In Belarus, 18 months ago, the people rose up against Lukashenko and wanted to replace him after a fraudulent election. And it was only because Putin sent troops in that they ended up getting, that Lukashenko was still in power. In Kazakhstan, just at the beginning of this year, there was a major effective coup where they got rid of the Nazarbayev family. And so Putin saw this and he thought, this is coming for me. This is gonna happen to me if I don't do something dramatic. And so what do you do if you're a dictator? You need to stay in power in order to stay alive, and you believe your time is almost up. You start a war. You deflect whatever anger people might have towards you, towards a foreign enemy. And so I don't believe any of the rhetoric that Vladimir Putin has said about NATO, about the Ukrainians, about the Nazis. It's all made up. It's all made up for the purpose of justifying a war, and he needs the war to stay in power. His biggest vulnerability is that he's stolen all this money over the last 20 years. He keeps the money with oligarchs in the West, and that's his Achilles heel because we have access to freeze that money. And I've been screaming from the rooftops for the last month that we should go after the oligarchs' money because that's what Putin cares about. It's his money. And he values money more than human life. And it's very interesting because the moment we start talking seriously about going after oligarchs, he's threatening nuclear war. Not that he's actually going to follow through on that today, but it shows you how much he values that, how upset he is by that. And that's our one bit of leverage. I don't think that at this point, freezing those assets is going to stop him in Ukraine. But what I do think is that all of a sudden, the calculus changes. On one hand, he has the reward of staying in power. On the other hand, all of his money is effectively inaccessible. And we're now in the game of trying to make it as costly as possible for him to do these terrible things that he's doing. And we should absolutely go after the thing that he values most, which is his money. And by doing that, going after the oligarchs. If you cut off the central bank, then effectively they have no access to whatever dollars they have on their reserves. And the European Union has done the same thing. And what this means is that even though Vladimir Putin has accumulated $640 billion of central bank reserves, that money is effectively inaccessible. So they can't use it to fund their war effort, and they can't use it to support the ruble as it goes into a free fall as a result of the SWIFT sanctions. And so it's a very powerful tool, very blunt instrument, but a very required tool based on the fact that of what Putin has done by invading Ukraine.
The Russian central bank has raised its basic interest rate from about 9.5% to 20%. What does that do to the oligarchs? What does that do to the average Russians? And for that matter, to people trying to take the money and flee the country?
Well, when a government raises interest rates like that, what they're trying to do is prevent people from converting their currency to a foreign currency by saying it's more attractive to keep your money in rubles. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think that there's any exchange rate at which people want to keep their money in rubles. They just want to get out as quickly as they can. So in addition to raising the rates, they've also limited the amount of foreign currency you can buy with your rubles, effectively putting in place pretty harsh exchange controls. And they do that because they're running out of money. Even though they have all this money in the bank, they can't access it. And so, these are tough measures that have been imposed for sure. They will have a big effect on the average Russian. And I guess the logic behind it is that a lot of average Russians don't want a war in the first place, and they particularly don't want a war when it's costing them so much personally. And although Russia's not a democracy, Putin can't help but see that people are pretty angry about this situation.